My name is Dean Kaufman, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be spending the next hour sharing tips and tricks and insights on how to succeed at the upcoming virtual SIIM webinar and virtual conference. My name is Dean Kaufman. I'm going to be joined today by some of my esteemed colleagues. Brad Levin is here. He's the chairman of the Corporate Advisory Task Force at SIIM, as well as a business leader at Vistage Imaging. And also Chris Roth is here. And Chris is the SIIM annual meeting program chair this year, as well as a practicing radiologist at Duke University. And my name is Dean Kaufman, and I'm the founder of Healthcare Service Consultants. I'm a longtime SIIM member and attendee of many in-person SIIM conferences, going back to the days when SIIM was known as SCAR. So it's a pleasure to be here. I focus now on helping companies with their product marketing. And I'm pleased to be able to represent SIIM and help bridge the gap between vendors and their needs and SIIM and what they have to offer. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So please be sure to submit your questions in the Q&A box that's in the bottom of your screen, and we will get to those after the presentation. So stick around for that. Our goals for today are to really help you as a vendor succeed at the upcoming virtual SIIM. SIIM cares very deeply about the vendor community. The vendors are a very important part of the success of all SIIM activities and shows, particularly this virtual meeting. So what we're going to do is focus on helping you align your expectations and goals with SIIM's unique culture and the diverse audience and the unique audience at SIIM, and understand how to maximize the capabilities of the virtual platform that SIIM is using. And then we'll discuss some best practices before, during, and after the show. And we'll get some opinions and perspectives from Brad Levin here, as well as from myself. Before we get into the webinar, I do want to introduce Dr. Chris Roth, who's, again, the program chair. So he's been in charge of what's the educational program at SIIM this year. And so he's going to spend a few minutes sharing his perspective, both from a strategic SIIM point of view, but also as a practicing radiologist. So Chris, please, why don't you take a few minutes and share your thoughts with the team.
Dean, thank you, and appreciate everybody being here. Before I start, a couple of disclosures. Some of the disclosures are I use many of your products day to day, and some of them I absolutely love, and some of them I think have opportunities for improvements. And to be transparent as well, I participate in the RSNA annual meeting development process. I'm here as the annual meeting program committee chair for SIIM, and SIIM is a society near and dear to me. I want to thank all of you for all of your support this year and in years past and in years to come. SIIM is online only this year, as you know. But good things can happen online. And the analogy that I shared with Brad and Dean the last time we talked in preparation for this conversation is I met my wife of 11 years online because I knew really critical information about her to get started. I knew her faith perspective. I knew how she thought of herself. I knew what she did for a living. I knew how tall she was. I knew that her look kind of fit my preferences. I knew all of that information, and I shared a bunch of my own, and we had a platform that brought us together. And good things can happen in an online, initial meeting that can't happen in a live meeting. Now, what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of the environment that we're all facing today from the perspective of those that you would consider customers in the healthcare world. Now, to me, really is the time for educating and building relationships with the people that are out there. Just like online dating, you can't go as deep with a prospective partner, if you will, but you can go wider and really expand your prospect list pretty easily. Your prospective customers are looking for some kind of a differentiator, something that makes your product, your booth, your presentation different than what they have today and different than what they would see at another booth. So when I shop, I try to cut to something myself pretty quickly, and it sometimes isn't even something that I knew that I needed, right? I didn't know I needed an iPhone until Apple showed me that it could do really awesome stuff that I didn't know that I was missing. Day 2 of the annual meeting is intended to be users and industry innovating together. This is something that SIIM is doing that is unique, and it is a strategic decision by us intended to put users and industry together to really solve some of the problems that live at the interspace between the two. And I think this is something that I'm very excited about myself, because I know in the relationships that I have with my industry partners, I learn something from you guys all the time. And obviously you guys learn from us too. So I think this is something that SIIM is trying to cultivate in terms of the relationships in the very close society already that SIIM is. The other thing strategically that I think is relevant to know is SIIM is putting a pretty deep push into global imaging informatics. We have a global imaging informatics set of educational tracks happening before, if you will, the North American track that you're familiar with, and after. So South America, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Asia, and Australia are going to have educational lectures just like we did last year for the virtual program for SIIM. If you want to consider it the North America program, I don't, but just to give you an idea, before the SIIM meeting starts, there's going to be global educational sessions, and after there will be global sessions as well. And I think this will play to many of the strengths of the industry partners that are on this conversation and are prepared to have those kind of global engagements. What I would do is really strongly consider your ability to show and tell what's new in your platform. You really want to keep your existing customer base right now. The hospitals that you're working with are just coming out of COVID. We all took a budget hit. Cost cutting is the name of the game, and major consolidations are happening in terms of practices and also in the platforms that we use. I was in a 3-hour enterprise-wide strategic planning meeting with one of our enterprise-wide vendors last week, and they pitched lots of new, really interesting ideas, things that we weren't prepared to really buy today, but they're setting the table for future purchases, or perhaps for us to turn this one product of theirs off in exchange for another. It feels a lot like it did right after we put in our electronic health record. For context, after we did that, all of us in leadership in my hospital were like, okay, whoa, where are we? What do we do now? That's kind of what it feels like now after COVID. Okay, we just came through something really crazy. What are we going to do now? What's important to us? What do we need to do to be successful in the really virtual world that we're faced with today? And the business cases that we are prioritizing are the ones that are dollar black, just plain and simple. Positive revenue, something that'll decrease cost. Those are a must. And I would encourage you to help us find the ROI in your product. And that really is why day 2 of the annual of this meeting is intended to bring you right next to us as we go through some of those conversations. I think it's a time for you to plant the seeds with the people that you're working with. You may not be able to go as deep in an online setting, but you'll certainly be able to reach more people than you have before. And I look forward to hearing more of what Dean and Brad have to say. Thanks very much for the time.
Thank you, Chris. Those are great points, and we're going to build off of a lot of them as we move through this, particularly planting the seeds and going wide. Let's talk a little bit about who SIIM is and who the SIIM attendee is, just to get grounded before we dive into strategies and tactics. SIIM is very different from other radiology societies, and therefore the meeting demographic is very different. SIIM number 1 identifies as representing enterprise imaging, not just radiology. So this is all medical imaging occurring inside and outside radiology, all across the healthcare enterprise. The attendees and the participants in the meeting are typically doers, not necessarily decision makers. So they're folks with administrative titles, some radiologists, of course, who oftentimes will have research interests, a lot of scientists, a lot of imaging informaticists, if you will, PhDs who are focused on doing deep dives into the problems and the impact of the problems that affect clinical workflow. As you might be able to see from this graph here, about 37% come from academic settings, and actually 26% in that yellow circle are from corporate, which is really interesting because it reminds us that a lot of product managers and product heads and software developers who work for vendors, i.e. your companies, are actually members of SIIM. And it really highlights how SIIM brings together the smart people in the vendor community along with the smart people in the clinical user community. And even though they may not be decision makers, like you might see at an RSNA, they are heavily focused on understanding and identifying the key problems and working together to identify the solutions to those problems. And so as a result of that, the strategy of SIIM is really focusing on innovation and advocating innovation. The SIIM shows, whether in person or the upcoming virtual program, are focused on facilitating innovation and really bringing together the vendors and the clinical users to achieve that goal. Vendors can really blend in with the attendees. You know, for any of you who've been to an in-person SIIM, I'm sure you can remember walking around, talking to clinical users, having people come into your booth to have a deep dive on a specific topic. And that deep dive is typically about problems and solutions and issues and what are you seeing and why, and really that collaboration that is so unique to SIIM. So we want to leverage that collaboration to make the most of the upcoming virtual event. Now, of course, as Chris mentioned, there are certainly challenges because we're not in person. It's hard to go super deep. There's not a captive audience. You're not having face-to-face meetings. You know, we all miss the fact that we can't meet face-to-face. We're not going to be shaking hands. But we've learned a lot over the last year through the virtual trade shows that we've been involved in. We've learned that attendees are primarily interested in getting CME, credit, education. You know, they're sitting in front of their workstations at their desks, and they're hopping onto these virtual conferences to listen to talks and to get their CME. So you're competing with a bit of distraction. There's conflicting demands. None of us are away, surrounded by the trade show in the hall, which isolates us and focuses our attention. But SIIM is doing some great things that are going to help our efforts that I'm going to get into. And I think it's important to realize that you do get out of it what you put into it. You know, a year ago, a lot of us might have said, well, you know, virtual is never going to be as good as in person. Well, I'd say it's just different. You know, we can't say that it's better or worse. Virtual events have a lot of value, as Chris mentioned. You can, it's still an event, so SIIM's doing a lot of promotion around the event. And because SIIM's actually doing a very good job with the virtual networking platform, there's a lot of opportunity for engagement. You'll hear me talk a lot about it as LinkedIn for SIIM, because it's really this online platform where we can all connect and chat and share information, much like LinkedIn is. Because it's SIIM, there's a lot of opportunities for thought leadership and education. And of course, your staff isn't being pulled away, you're not traveling, so your T&E expenses are also going to be lower. And so I really suggest that you focus on planting the seeds for future purchases. You know, as with most trade shows, success typically comes later. Granted, at an in-person, maybe you're meeting with people to try to close a deal, or maybe you just close something and it's a great opportunity for a lot of handshaking. Okay, you're not going to get that now. but you're going to get a lot of other stuff. And a lot of that other stuff has to do with top of funnel activity, building your sales funnel, bringing people in by creating awareness and leveraging your thought leadership and education. Certainly brand identity, but that's the low-hanging fruit. With SIIM, what's very unique is that you can do a bit of a deep dive on your products to educate people about what problems are you solving, how deep is your expertise, who's using your products, what problems do you solve, and really show people that you know what you're talking about and you understand the problems that you solve. And it's a great opportunity to have your smart people here, your product managers. It's not just something where you're going to have your salespeople engaged, but you really want to bring your people into the funnel here for future success. So strategically, I would really focus on thinking about something new to introduce at the show. That's a great way to get people's attention. Again, it could be a product or a service. It could be a new implementation. But try to identify something new that you can message around SIIM. That's a great way to drive people to your virtual space, and it can create some buzz, particularly if that something new aligns with some of the major topics and sessions that SIIM is putting forth in the educational component. Because it's always valuable if you can piggyback on top of those educational sessions. It really helps to authenticate your message. You want to tailor your message for the SIIM audience and the fact that they're technical. So it's a chance to, again, go deeper than you might at other radiology trade shows. You might want to have one of your technical people on the team, your product manager. Think of who you would normally send to SIIM, get them involved. And of course, it's a great opportunity for B2B networking. And primarily, it's a small show, but also, as we'll see, through the networking, you can very easily connect. So set some appropriate goals. Don't set the same goals that you might have at an in-person show where it's how many badge scans or how many product demos are pre-scheduled. Focus on something both during and pre and post-show. You know, a small number of high quality engagements, for example, that can be measured through asset downloads or chats with a new prospect that you're trying to go after, or chats with an existing customer who you have been unable to connect with lately, or maybe you just finished an implementation. So it's obviously it's harder to qualify people's interest. Focus on that after the fact and really just try to focus on a relatively small number of high quality engagements. So with that said, I'm going to turn to my friend Brad here and just ask for his input in perspective on optimal virtual meeting strategies and goals.
Thanks so much, Dean. For those that don't know me, my name is Brad Levin. I'm the General Manager North America for Visage. I'm also our Global Head of Marketing. Really thank everybody for their time today, and Dean, for your opening, and Dr. Ross opening comments as well. I think what the opportunity that we have in front of us is unique. Certainly SIIM is an opportunity for everyone to really celebrate imaging IT. And I know for those of you that have participated in the face-to-face meeting, recognize that it's a time to really celebrate everything imaging IT. And I know while we all want to be together, that's going to come later on this year, hopefully at some other shows. But for SIIM, having a virtual opportunity to meet with our friends and colleagues and customers and potential customers is a great opportunity. One of the things I want to reinforce is that SIIM has a unique culture in that industry works very closely with imaging IT professionals, whether they're physicians or SIPs, and we're able to get involved really deeply on various committees that help to run SIIM, the programming committee that puts together the format for the annual meeting, and also consult. So as the chair of the Commercial Advisory Task Force, we're continually offering insights from an industry perspective to the SIIM leadership and our board members at SIIM to optimally align the virtual platform so that it can be a successful event for everyone. Some of the things that I've seen work very well in our company is to really look at the virtual meeting as an opportunity of a unique capacity. So just like you would prepare with your commercial teams, your product teams for a big customer meeting or a prospect meeting, if you're going to do a demonstration or you're presenting your corporate qualifications, you're going to prepare for that meeting and take the time necessary to be successful. You're going to do the same thing for the virtual SIIM. You're going to take advantage of the tools that are made available by SIIM. You're going to learn how to use them effectively across your team. You'll coach your colleagues how to optimally use those tools, and you'll identify through the SIIM schedule what alignment you have from a commercial perspective in terms of your product expertise, your customer base, and align that with what's going to be the common themes of the annual SIIM meeting. And when you do that and you take good notes and you prep, you're going to be able to have engagements. And as Dean mentioned before, blending in with attendees at SIIM really is critical to share your expertise, to provide comments while a presentation is going on. All the presentations this year are going to be done live, so you can really engage in real time in an authentic way where you're not pitching your technology or your experience, but you're presenting your expertise in a way that adds to the conversation. And that blending in is going to pay dividends for the balance of that virtual meeting and your opportunities that become to the forefront out of the annual meeting. Great.
Thank you. Great points. Let's dive into some of the specific pre-show tactics and strategies here. We're in that pre-show phase here. SIIM's going to be opening up the virtual platform on May 3rd, which is in just over a week, or next week, actually. So you really want to start getting together the materials, your strategy, your thoughts, your team now, which is why we're doing this webinar now. Once the platform opens, get in there and take advantage of the basics. Everybody who is an exhibiting or sponsoring vendor has access to this material. If you're not yet a sponsoring vendor, now's the time to sign up. It's not too late. Get in there, set up your company profile, make sure everybody in your team has access to the platform. You're going to hear me talking about GRIP. GRIP is the name of the virtual networking platform that SIIM is using. It is a integrated platform, which means that the educational sessions, the sponsor virtual booths, if you will, all the networking are all in one place. And this is very good for a number of reasons that we will get into. Make sure you know who your booth staff is now. Get them in there as soon as possible, starting on the 3rd, to set up their profiles, hold training. You know, don't overlook this stuff. Another really important thing, I think, is everybody has the opportunity to add a video to their virtual sponsor booth / sponsor page. Now, it's easy to go to your YouTube channel or your archives and pull out a product video or some marketing video. But what I recommend is that you take a few minutes to produce a 2-minute introductory video. And what you could do is just get your sales leader or product leader in front of their laptop, have them open up a Zoom window, much like we're doing here, and just speak for 2 minutes in a very informal manner about what's in your virtual booth, what's new. You know, do a little bit of a deep dive to cover some of the details, keeping in mind that this is a more technical audience. But be really authentic and honest about what people are going to learn. You know, thank them, give them a quick update if there was a recent launch or you know, something that's relevant. But that's a much more effective video. Also, everyone's going to have access to product listings. SIIM's taken great pains this year to make sure that there's accurate and detailed product listings. So select the ones that are relevant to you. It's very important because it's going to help identify your company to attendees who use that same category listing to identify their interests. And that's where the matchmaking capability will come into play. That's one of the ways, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Within the virtual platform, your virtual booth is actually referred to as a sponsor page. So I am inclined to talk about virtual booth, but it's actually the sponsor page. Bottom line is, think of it as a microsite that targets all of the attendees in the virtual show. All vendors at all sponsorship levels have the ability to add video and PDFs and links and images. So you want to really think about what your theme is going to be, and then use assets that support that theme. And then in your video that I just talked about, articulate that theme and reinforce it, and do it in sufficient detail that it's going to really resonate with the SIIM attendee. This GRIP platform has a lot of networking capability as well that you want to take advantage of, and start getting yourself familiar with it on May 3rd. One of the first things you need to do is set up your booth staff profiles, identify 2 or 3 people. I'd suggest one of them be a product manager or somebody with more technical skills. Familiarize yourself with the manual networking, which enables you to reach out to people, as Dr. Ross said, because this is a bit of a LinkedIn for SIIM. Everybody's contact information is there and everybody's name is there. So you can immediately go in, actually starting, I think, May 10th, and start showing interest in people and connecting with people. There's also the matchmaking tool, which uses AI to match people based on the product categories or the interests that you enter when you register. And then there's also a company team space that you want to set up. And that's where everybody on your company team can see each other's profiles and connections and calendars and meetings. And you also see information about everybody who visited your sponsor page. They're referred to as inbound leads. And so take advantage of all of these networking opportunities, because it is really all encapsulated here. And there's a lot of good capability, and it's amplified by the fact that SIIM has taken great pains to work with the GRIP platform manufacturer to leverage all of the learnings from the last year, and also use all of the features in this integrated platform. So I think we're going to have a great experience, and I think you'll find that there's a lot of capability here that didn't exist in previous virtual conferences. If you're speaking, this is a great opportunity to create engagement and to build credibility with the SIIM audience. Obviously, it's a promotional opportunity, but more importantly, or equally importantly, given the SIIM audience, it's a very important thought leadership opportunity. If you're speaking, you want to prepare your speaker to make sure that they are prepared to educate and not sell. The SIIM audience doesn't want to be sold to. They want to learn that you understand the problems that you solve very well. And why do you understand them? Right? Through interaction and engagement with customers. And as a result of that deep understanding, your product has a deep product capability. And you've got support people and just a general body of knowledge. So it's a fabulous opportunity. SIIM has made available some great opportunities here, the Ask Industries. There's also a roundtable that is available to replicate the sitting around the table and exchanging ideas. So again, it's not a sales situation, it's an educational situation. But by creating that credibility and that engagement, it opens up opportunities for your sales team to continue the conversation after the live presentations within the virtual networking platform, but then even more importantly is to take those conversations outside of the SIIM virtual event after it's over and turn those conversations into leads, because you've shown people that you know what you're talking about. Promotionally, you obviously want to let people know that you're participating, encourage your audience to register and participate, because if they're not registered, they can't see your talks, they can't visit the sponsor page, just like in a real in-person show. You want to promote this not just externally, but you want to promote it internally to your sales, service, and support organizations, so that everyone across your organization understands what's new, what are you saying, what's the theme. You can then convey that information to customers and prospects during their day-to-day. And you really want to articulate what are people going to see. Again, don't just think about brand recognition. The SIIM audience wants to know, what are you talking about? What can they learn? What's new? You could certainly use a teaser strategy in a multi-phase promotional plan, so that early on in the execution, you're telling people that new stuff is coming, and then a couple of weeks later, you tell them, here it is. So you're creating some engagement. You're getting people to come back to your website, your social media channels. And speaking of the channels that you should use, obviously online presence is critical. Whether it's a virtual show or an in-person show, you want to make sure that your website is up to date with information that supports what's on your sponsor page. Your website should have all the gory details so that you're driving people back to your website. You want to make it interactive and engaging with some clear calls to action. And if you have the time and the budget, a great thing to do is to create a microsite, which could be just a single page on your website that's dedicated to SIIM, with SIIM branding and content and messaging that is very specific to what you are talking about on your sponsor page at SIIM, so that it's one-stop shopping for everybody, with a very clear, dedicated contact us form. Don't just drive people back to a generic contact us form. Have something that is SIIM specific where possible. And of course, leverage all of your social media and digital channels. SIIM's doing a great job to foster conversation before, during, and after the show. So you want to be part of that conversation. Primarily because with the SIIM audience, it's a more technical product and solution-oriented conversation. Certainly use email, blogs, press releases, short form content to expand upon the 200 characters that Twitter may limit you to. It's a great time to share that longer form content externally as well as internally. You certainly want to enable your sales force to be able to send personalized emails to their customers and to prospects who they think or know will be participating in SIIM, to let them know what you're talking about, what's new, what they might see in on the sponsor page, or if you're giving a talk, what are you talking about, with sufficient details so that it's really engaging to the SIIM audience. Particularly around the educational tracks. As Brad mentioned, there's very clear educational tracks at SIIM. There always are, and you want to become familiar with those and identify which of those tracks or talks or sessions align with the problems and solutions that you as a company are focused on and have a commercial solution for. Another thing too is that it's typically a little bit of a younger and more tech-savvy audience at SIIM. So they're a little bit more inclined to use LinkedIn and Twitter or be receptive to clicking on an email than non-SIIM audiences. Of course, SIIM's great for business development, in part because it's a relatively tight-knit show and community, but also with the virtual platform, all of the vendor representatives are listed along with all the attendees. So it makes it very easy, much like LinkedIn, to go in and see who's who at a given company, reach out to them, and try to make new contacts. So with that said, I'm going to turn to Brad again and ask you to just comment a bit about pre-show strategies that have worked for you over the years.
Sure, Dean, thanks. So I think you need to look at a virtual meeting very similarly to a face-to-face meeting. What we found that has worked is to strategically identify your best opportunities to shine at a virtual meeting. There's so much content out there. As one individual, as I mentioned before, it's being presented live. So you're not going to be able to participate in every session that's going on. So make sure that your team that's registered for the meeting is optimally distributed across the various talks. So if there's multiple talks going on where you've got a vested interest, divide and conquer, and make sure that you've got the right individuals participating in those sessions. It's important to make sure you do your homework in advance. So you look at who's speaking, what have they been talking about online and in their social channels in advance of the meeting, and how does that dovetail and align with your own expertise, your customer base, your reference accounts, your theme for SIIM, and triangulate that information, make your show plan, know who's going where, use your communications tools outside of the virtual meeting to keep in touch with your virtual SIIM team, and share your learnings. So-and-so from this institution is participating. They've been chatting online about cloud or AI or whatever the topic du jour is, and make sure that you've got your representative participating in a forum where they can interact. SIIM is providing this end-to-end platform to allow that rich discourse to occur both during the meeting and then after the meeting. Schedule time for demonstrations and other things that will add to that conversation. One of the things that I think we all recognize is that in imaging IT, the sales cycle is incredibly long. Very, very few times in my career have I gone to a trade show, virtual or in person, where you're able to do a deal on the show floor and get a contract within weeks. It just rarely happens. But because of that long sales cycle, have a long horizon line for your interactions. Plant the seed, as Dr. Ross said, participate, follow up after the meeting, and you'll bear fruit down the road. And if you do your job and your team does their job, you'll hear, oh, I remember when you talked about blah, blah, blah at SIIM. Whether you were presenting or dialoguing in a chat or a round table, doesn't matter. If you came off as authentic and you had some information that was interesting to share, they'll remember you. If your team does the opposite and tries to do a hard sell, I think you're going to push some people away. But if you look at it from an educational opportunity, I think you're going to be really successful.
Great points. Thanks. Great. So now let's move on to things that you should be doing during the show, because it's very important that you have a plan for what you're going to do during the 4 days, because SIIM is actually 4 days now virtually, not the typical 3, to engage with attendees, and even those who don't or have not been able to attend. So engage is the watchword. And you want to use the platform, the virtual platform, to engage with people who are attending. As I mentioned, through the manual networking, reaching out to people. There's also a speed networking feature that SIIM is leveraging, where there will be these short video conferences on different topics that they will be announcing, and vendors and attendees will be able to jump on those and participate in the conversations, which is just a great way to mimic what we miss doing face-to-face. The team's collaboration, as I mentioned, there's chat there, there's inbound information about people who are visiting your sponsor page, and you want to try to engage with them as much as possible. There is some live chatting that's associated with your company profile, but it's also important to remember that, and this was already mentioned, most of the talks are going to be given live, and this is very different. So it's going to be just like we're doing now. There's a live talk, there's going to be live chat happening during those live talks. So that's a great opportunity for your booth staff or your product manager who might be sitting in on those talks to engage with the other attendees during the talk, and then bring that conversation back to the virtual booth or back to the team's collaboration page, or just bring it offline after the fact, or all of the above. It's just, there's a lot of opportunities to engage here. Keep in mind that booth staff can participate in the educational sessions. So as you're planning your booth staff and talking about how the sponsor page is going to be monitored, really think about who's going to go to the talks. First you have to identify them, but who's going to go to those, who's going to stay in the booth, who's going to monitor the team's collaboration, to make sure that all of these different networking tools that are at your disposal are being utilized, because there is a lot here. Of course, you also want to engage externally, because a lot of the conversation will also happen outside of the virtual platform, and not necessarily at the same time, but at night, people after dinner, they're digesting their day and they're thinking about a talk that they heard. Also, some of these more tech savvy attendees are going to be on their phones, and they're going to be, hey, I just went to a great talk. Great conversation here. Here's what I learned. Here's what I saw. Anybody thinking about this? And SIIM's doing a great job of using the hashtags and generating conversation on the SIIM channel. And of course, this is one of the strengths of Twitter. It's live. It's a great way to engage in live conversations. And you want to take the conversation outside of the virtual platform as well. So coordinate with your marketing person is something that comes to mind here. Get somebody on point for communicating with you and being that person who's going to get those tweets out or those LinkedIn posts out at the end of each day. And then monitor the SIIM Twitter feed to jump on those public conversations. Don't just comment, don't just like, actually participate. We're not able to talk face to face, but we can have these digital conversations. So with that, I'm going to turn to Brad again to just ask you to share some thoughts about how to engage digitally during the conference. And I know you touched on some of these, so.
Yeah, no, something came to mind. You were talking about liking and sharing social media posts. One of the things that that we talk about frequently is in imaging IT, and Dean had presented this at the beginning of the talk today. We've got various constituencies that that participate in imaging IT. And what we found, and I'm sure you've observed this as well, is for the most part, the various classes or tribes of professionals tend to stick together online. Radiologists love to chat it up with each other, especially on rad Twitter, med Twitter. SIPs like to talk to each other more often in private, and aren't so actively engaged in public social media. Private forums, the SIIM listserv, they still have a listserv that's going on after all these years, and it's very dynamic in terms of that forum. But we as vendors have an opportunity to bridge those classes of professionals. So by providing unique insights, or as Dr. Roth was saying, the ROI of our products and services that we offer, we have the ability to bridge those environments. And if we just sit on the sidelines and expect those conversations to happen, they're most likely not going to, and they won't include us in the vendor community. So it behooves us to get involved, to get off the sidelines, to get in the conversation, whether it's in the GRIP platform and providing live commentary and chatting directly while the presentations are going on, or on public social media. It doesn't matter. Getting the word out there is the name of the game, and people will remember you as long as you're offering authentic, valuable information.
Yep, great points. All right, let's move on here. Just keeping track of the time here. So post-show. So obviously your work doesn't end when the show ends, or your opportunity to engage does not end when the show ends. And in many ways, it just starts. So just like with an in-person show, you're going to have badge scans that you're going to be downloading and distributing to the sales team. Here, you're going to have inbound leads that you're going to be downloading afterwards. And those inbound leads will include contact information from everybody that you engaged with and visited your sponsor page. And you'll want to scrub and prioritize and assign follow-up with your sales leadership. Carve out who are your OEMs, who are your existing customers, who are your prospects that were high target customer prospects. Who's just a tire kicker? Who do you want to throw out? Who's the competition, perhaps? But go through that scrubbing process and then get the information out to your sales team so that they can do follow-up. Add it to your CRM and your email marketing tools so that you can continue the conversation. Just like in an in-person show, you want to continue the conversation. Maybe it was a little easier, or maybe it just feels different that you were at the show and you talked to Bob, and now you're going to go home and 2 weeks later email Bob and call him. Well, here it just happened digitally. You still want to set up a phone call. You may not be going to his hospital to visit him, but you still want to set up a phone call, send him an email, and continue that detailed conversation. Remember, even though it might be a detailed conversation about a specific problem or solution, that conversation can evolve into a higher level conversation with the decision maker once that individual feels very comfortable that you know how to solve the problem that they have, and you're able to provide sufficient proof that you can solve that problem. So with that said, Brad, any thoughts here on post-show follow-up before we get into the Q&A?
I think this is where the rubber meets the road. You have to do your homework. You have to provide follow-up. You have to nurture those opportunities once you identified them. Reinforce it with tangible information. Provide free resources. Provide connections to your install base. Documentation that reinforces your message at the meeting, and take advantage of those opportunities. This is our profession. We're here to sell and have commercial success. And if you don't follow up, you're never going to reap those rewards. So it's critical that you do your homework and align yourself with a post-show strategy, and start immediately. Because you're virtual, you're not traveling. You don't need to wait for the Monday morning after the meeting. Start that afternoon. And I'm sure SIIM will provide those tools that you can download the leads on a daily, minute-by-minute basis. And because of that, you can act on those opportunities in real time. Don't waste a moment's notice, and make the most out of the opportunity that's in front of us.
Yeah, that's a great point, that immediacy. Nobody's getting on a plane for a day and taking a day off because they had to work on Sunday. You can just pivot right to download, scrub, follow up, and which helps to enable that continuity of conversation, if you will. It's not like, oh, the show happened last week and now we're doing follow up. So
Yeah, one more comment, Dean.
yeah, please.
You know, the one of the things I think we all in industry need to recognize in these virtual platforms, it's human behavior not to interact. It's hard enough when we're face to face. People walk by the booth, want to come in and learn about your products, but don't step out of across that imaginary boundary. And in many ways, in a virtual meeting many meetings that we've participated in over the course of the last year, individuals aren't really actively chatting with vendors. They're not asking for demonstrations, but it's incumbent upon the vendors to start that engagement. Just like you would chat up somebody walking in front of your booth, do the same at the virtual meeting. Do it at the sessions, encourage dialogue, set up a virtual meeting, and make those magic moments happen. But don't just sit back and assume that people are going to come to you. You need to do the targeting and go to them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Digital is it forces action in order to create a reaction.
Correct.
Thank you. So just to summarize the key areas here, set some appropriate goals and expectations around this being a virtual show. It's different from in person. It's not better or worse. There's strengths and weaknesses of both. So set some appropriate goals that can be measured and can be met for this virtual show. I recommend that you identify something that's new and compelling, and it's obviously educational. As we keep talking about, the SIIM attendee is more technical and wants to work with the vendor community to identify solutions and approaches to solving a problem. Nobody has all the answers. And I find time and again that the vendors don't have all the answers and the clinical users don't have all the answers. But when you get the parties together and the heads sharing ideas, that's when problems are solved and unique solutions are developed. And that's how you sell at SIIM. The virtual networking platform that SIIM's using, which is called GRIP, is going to offer a lot more networking and integrated networking capability than we've seen in the past. And you want to make sure that you take the time starting on May 3rd to familiarize yourself with that and use it to its fullest extent. And then from a promotions perspective, you want to promote it externally, let people know what you're doing at SIIM, what's new, why you're there, if you're talking, what you're talking about and why it's important. But then also internally to educate your sales and service and support teams to make sure that they can communicate to customers and prospects effectively what you're doing and why they should participate in SIIM. And you do this before, during, and after the conference, just like you would during an in-person show. And if you leverage all of these approaches and really put the time in to engage with people and from a problem solution specific types of conversations, I think you'll have a lot of success. So with that, I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank my colleague Brad and also Dr. Roth for his comments earlier. What we're going to do here is we're going to shift to the Q&A session. Before I do that, I want to just remind everybody that SIIM is having another webinar tomorrow. And that's going to be an educational webinar just about the GRIP platform. So make sure you sign up for that. That's promoted on the SIIM website, as well as SIIM's been sending out a lot of email, newsletter announcements about that. And that will just be a deep dive on GRIP. And so with that, I just want to thank everybody on our behalf. Here's my contact information as well as Brad's. And here's just a reminder on how to connect with SIIM on social media. And now what I want to do is remind everybody, if you have a question, put your question into the Q&A box so that we can address them. And so first question that I see here is, does the platform have the ability to set up a meeting schedule with interested parties? So within the Teams function, there is a calendar. So what you would do is, if somebody reached out to me and I wanted to set up a meeting, I would reach out to somebody in the virtual platform and set up a meeting and with them one-on-one. And that capability exists. And then once that meeting is set up, that calendar entry would show up in the Teams section so that everybody on my team could see when my meetings are. And that enables you to coordinate meetings to make sure that, don't double book things if there's only one person available to, support, say the sales leader, for example, who can only be in one place at once. So I hope that answers your question, Tony. And let's see, there was another question here. HCP Reverse Expo. Live meetings took place on scheduled days, sort of like having a Zoom meeting. Yeah, so a couple of things are coming to mind here. One is that video is part of all of the meetings. So when you schedule a meeting with someone through the GRIP platform, that can be a video meeting, and I believe it's Zoom. The other thing is, when we talked about the speed, what's it called? Speed dating, I think it is. Those are also going to be video based. So SIIM is using as much video as possible, because one of the things we've learned over the years is that we want to look at each other. We're human beings. We like to have face-to-face conversations. And video is something we've gotten very familiar with and very comfortable with. So integrating video into the GRIP platform is something that SIIM has worked hard to achieve. There's another question here about meeting lists, attendee lists. And so yes, there is a post-meeting attendee list. And that attendee list, I don't think it has email in it. I know that's something that people are often interested in, but keep in mind that the inbound leads list that you get of everybody who visited your sponsor page or that you engaged with, you will have all of their contact information, as well as information about their that comes from their registration questions. So it would be that's information about their interests, buying plans. So there's a lot more information there than you might just get with a conventional badge scan, which is usually where they work and their email and their phone number. Let's see, there's another question here. Can you provide more details on monitor live chat in your company profile? Is the chat anyone visiting our page? So there is chat on the sponsor page. In the webinar tomorrow, they're going to do a deep dive on the specifics of the chatting. But there is chat on the company profile. But even more importantly is that there's live chatting in all of the talks. There's also the networking, where you can reach out to somebody to chat with them directly there. And then there's the matchmaking that will suggest people that you should connect with. And there's chat as part of that. So I know with some other conferences, it was just a bit of a generic live chat window, and that was the only way to engage with people. But at the SIIM virtual conference, there are multiple ways to engage with folks.
Dean, there's a question
Yeah.
in the chat about recommended booth coverage over the course of the virtual meeting. For example, should it be 24/7 coverage? And certainly this is going to be a global meeting in some respects with global presentations daily.
Yeah.
What do you think about exhibitors in terms of how they should staff their sponsor page for the duration of the show?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I've been involved in other conferences where 24/7 coverage was appropriate, because there were people in Asia who were jumping on. My sense with SIIM, though, is that the activity really circles or evolves around the talks and the talk schedules that SIIM has put forth. My understanding is that it is not a 24/7 schedule, but I would anticipate or suggest manning the virtual platform during the times that the talks are being given, because that's the time of greatest engagement and activity, whether it be in your sponsor page or anywhere else. What are your thoughts?
I totally agree. Given other large virtual meetings that had an international audience, the interaction on the page, I think, is really focused in the time zone that the main geography for the meeting. So the main geography for the SIIM meeting will be North America. No doubt about that. Are there going to be international participants? Absolutely. And I think I encourage my industry colleagues to engage with them. But I think everyone recognizes the challenges of a virtual meeting and the challenge of time zone management. So as long as you timely get back to people that interact with you on your sponsor page, I think you'll be just fine. Spend most of your resources during the core hours of the meeting.
Yeah. It's I think if you're a global organization and you can coordinate with a colleague in Europe or a colleague in Asia, that is a sound strategy. And that might enable you to provide that 24/7 coverage. And then there's just a last question here about, can you get a link directly to your virtual booth? Well, the downside of all of these virtual conferences is that you can't. Which is why in the promotions we advocate that you promote that people sign up, register for SIIM, attend SIIM, and through that participation and attendance, they'll gain access to all of your educational information, including your sponsor page. So with that said, we are past the top of the hour here. So we need to wrap up. And with that, thank you very much again, Brad, for your time and sharing your perspective. And also to Dr. Chris Roth for taking the time to share his perspective, and to all of you for participating in this webinar, which has been recorded, and the recording will be available on the SIIM website. So have a great day, and we will see you at the virtual SIIM. Bye now.